That character is a sociopath, but a very sexy sociopath. But for her, sex was just another tool. One crossed leg, the whole world held its breath. One stroke, the whole world turned its back. Sharon Stone was once the most seductive goddess in Hollywood, but in just 9 days she nearly died from a brain hemorrhage. She survived only to find herself with nothing. No memory, no child, no career, no money. Her husband divorced her and married someone else. Hollywood mocked her. Friends disappeared from a symbol of universal desire to a joke no one wanted to mention. But Sharon Stone refused to die. And the story of how she rewrote her life, painful, fierce, yet full of pride, will stir something deep within you. Early life. Before becoming the sex symbol of the 1990s, Sharon Stone was just a strange and quiet little girl in a cold, small town called Melville, Pennsylvania. The second of 4 siblings, Sharon was born into poverty. Her father was a factory worker. Her mother juggled bookkeeping with homemaking. But what set her apart wasn't her background. It was a mind that far exceeded the boundaries of a typical small-town child. Before she turned 1, she was already walking and talking. By grade school, her IQ test result came back as 154. But genius in a world that doesn't know how to love what's different often feels like a sentence. Her peers called her a bookworm, a freak. No one wanted to sit next to her. No one wanted to come near. She skipped grades and graduated high school at just 15. But that also meant she never truly had a childhood. More frightening than loneliness was the darkness within her own family. Sharon didn't fully remember what had happened, not until a therapy session years later when buried memories came flooding back like a violent storm. Her grandfather had sexually abused both her and her sister throughout their childhood. Things that couldn't be named, couldn't be acknowledged, couldn't be told to anyone. Her grandmother locked the door and forced the girls to stand and stare at his corpse in the coffin, an invisible punishment. Her mother herself, a silent victim of the same twisted father, could only say, "I didn't know it happened, but I hated him." That horror turned Sharon into a child who was constantly alert, constantly shrinking, constantly trying to control everything around her so she'd never feel powerless again. But the world didn't stop with one evil man. Her Uncle Gene suffered from severe mental illness. One day when Sharon was still very young, he pointed a gun at his head and threatened suicide right in front of her. Later, he froze to death outside their home, blood pooling across the porch after a fall. Sharon's exhausted mother just shrugged. That's just how he was. No one taught Sharon how to face pain. They only taught her how to ignore it. Then came another accident, this time on horseback. A clothes line got caught around her neck, throwing her to the ground, breaking her neck and nearly killing her. The cut missed a fatal point by mere millimeters. But that wasn't all. A lightning strike transmitted through the well while she was washing sent her body into convulsions and required weeks of cardiac monitoring. Inside and out, body and soul, Sharon Stone bore cracks everywhere. "I didn't know I was broken back then," she said. "I just knew I wasn't like anyone else and I wasn't allowed to make a mistake because if I did, everything would fall apart." The world taught Sharon Stone that to be born a girl meant being weak, being silent, being violated. But she refused to accept that. And to survive, she chose to become someone who never cried even when her heart had shattered long ago. Early career. After graduating high school at 15 and earning a scholarship to Edinburgh University, Sharon Stone thought she was headed for an academic path. But amid the dry, impersonal lectures, she felt like she was living someone else's life. She didn't belong in Melville. She didn't want to spend the rest of her days in that small town where every glance was laced with judgment, and every road led to the invisible walls of poverty and silence. Then a local beauty pageant accidentally opened the first door. Sharon won, not because she was the glamorous type, but because she had something people couldn't look away from. The aura of a woman who knew she had to leave. Soon after, she was invited to model in New York, a contract with Ford Models, something hundreds of girls only dreamed of. But to Sharon, standing still in front of a camera, putting on lipstick, smiling and posing, felt no different from her childhood where everything had to be silent, submissive, and braced for survival. Stand there, look pretty, but don't say a word. Don't express, don't think. "I hated that," she said. Acting then became her escape. Sharon wanted to speak, to tell stories, to breathe through her characters. But Hollywood in the 1980s wasn't built for sharp, intelligent, unpredictable women. She was rejected audition after audition. They said she wasn't sexy enough, her face too angular, her eyes too intelligent, not soft enough, not fit to be a screen girlfriend. Her first film appearance was a silent, uncredited role in Woody Allen's Stardust Memories, 1980, a nameless figure among big names. Then came a string of forgettable parts in Deadly Blessing, 1981, Irreconcilable Differences, 1984, each time on screen for mere minutes, usually just decorative alongside male leads. The crowd still didn't know her name. Directors kept shaking their heads, the press didn't care. Sharon Stone was considered second tier, not enough to carry a film, not enough to explode, not enough to be trusted with depth. But what they didn't understand was this. She wasn't there to ask for a chance, she was there to make one. Then came Basic Instinct, a 10-magnitude earthquake. But before we talk about that explosion, you need to know, to land the role of Catherine Trell, she traded more than just fame. She gambled with her very dignity. Career breakthrough. In 1992, the cinematic world changed forever, all because of a 16-second scene. Basic Instinct premiered amid a storm of controversy, its raw sexuality and psychological gamesmanship sparking outrage and fascination in equal measure. But it was precisely this that made it a phenomenon. Sharon Stone, as the enigmatic writer Catherine Tremell, walked into the interrogation room with a defiant gaze, crossed her legs, and flipped the power dynamic entirely. In a room full of men trying to corner her, she left them stunned with nothing more than a glance and an unexpected gesture, and left the whole world breathless. That leg-crossing scene became the most rewatched moment in film history. People debated, analyzed, praised, and condemned it, but no one forgot it. Sharon Stone exploded into stardom. Her name dominated magazine covers. Directors competed for her. Studios offered long-term contracts. She became the sex symbol of the decade. Cold, intelligent, dangerous, and needing no man to complete her. But behind that blinding spotlight was a betrayal. Before filming the interrogation scene, director Paul Verhoeven told her to remove her white underwear because it reflected the light on camera. He swore that nothing would be visible, that the camera angles would be carefully controlled. Sharon, trusting the crew, trusting his word, agreed. But when the final cut was screened, she was stunned. Her most private part was clearly visible under the lighting, exposed to millions of viewers around the world. She stood up, slapped Verhoeven in the ear, and called her lawyer. She wanted the scene removed, but the contract was signed, the cut was locked, the studio refused, and Hollywood stayed silent. That day, Sharon understood that scene would make her name, and it would also trap her in an image she never chose. And it did. After Basic Instinct, the roles came, but no one cared what she could act. They only cared how much more she would take off. From an actress who wanted to be heard, Sharon was reduced to a vessel of public desire. No one called her by name. No one spoke of her craft. Only the eyes, the legs, and that legendary scene were replayed again and again on television. She once said, "It took me a whole decade to prove I was more than just a pair of icy legs." That effort was finally recognized in 1995 when she portrayed Ginger McKenna in Martin Scorsese's Casino, a role that was seductive, brutal, and heartbreakingly tragic. It earned her her first Oscar nomination and the clearest proof, yet, that Sharon Stone was a real actress. But prejudice is stubborn. To Hollywood, she was still Catherine Trell, still the leg-crossing scene, still a sex symbol, not an artist, and that would turn the years ahead into a waking nightmare. Personal life and tragedy. Throughout her life, Sharon Stone was hailed as the most dangerous woman on screen. But in reality, her heart was delicate, vulnerable in ways no one could have imagined. Behind the glamour was a woman who deeply longed to be loved, not for her fame, not for her sensual beauty, but for her flawed, very human self. Her first marriage came in 1984 to producer Michael Greenberg, whom she met while filming the Vegas Strip War. At first, their relationship brimmed with hope, but happiness barely had time to blossom before pain came knocking. Sharon suffered a miscarriage, a devastating blow for a woman yearning to be a mother. Not long after, she was diagnosed with lupus, an autoimmune disease that nearly erased her ability to have children. Their love withered under the weight of medications and despair. By 1987, the marriage quietly dissolved as if it had never happened. From then on, Sharon began a crooked journey in search of love, filled with names that, when mentioned, make her either chuckle bitterly or fall silent to swallow back tears. There was a brief romance with country star Dwight Yoakam, a chart-topping sensation. At first, it was intense, bold, passionate, the kind of affair the public fantasized about between a movie star and a rocker. But soon after, Yoakam Cry mocked her in the media. Kissing Sharon Stone is like eating a sandwich full of sand, dry, gritty, and unpleasant. A sentence crafted to humiliate, to damage, and impossible to take back. Sharon never responded publicly, but friends said she wept in silence. Not because she was rejected, but because she was disrespected. She didn't just lose love, she lost her dignity. Then came William MacDonald, a wealthy businessman, formerly married to one of her close friends. When he left his wife for Sharon, the tabloids pounced. Sharon Stone, husband snatcher. She was branded a real-life femme fatale, a walking danger, as if her on-screen roles had consumed her identity, as if she no longer had the right to love. MacDonald gave her a diamond ring, a promise. But before the wedding, Sharon returned it via feed decks. No note, no message. She didn't need to explain. She just needed to escape a game in which she was never allowed to be innocent. Then came Phil Bronstein, editor-in-chief of the San Francisco Chronicle. Unlike the men before him, Phil was discreet, mature, and composed. They married in 1998 in an intimate ceremony. In 2000, the couple adopted Ran Joseph Bronstein, a moment so emotional that Sharon wept, for it was the first time she truly became a mother. To her, Ran wasn't a child she had taken in. He was destiny. She cared for him like a single mother, never relying on a nanny. Sleepless nights rocking him, meals cooked with her own hands. All of it was her way of compensating for what she couldn't do biologically. She finally had a family. She believed peace had come. But then the stroke struck like a tragic script penned by a merciless fate. No one, not even Sharon Stone herself, could have imagined that the woman who once made the whole world hold its breath with a single-leg cross would one day lie curled up on the floor, head slammed against a coffee table, blood seeping from her spine, skull and brain vessels with no one knowing. In September 2001, just months after adopting her son and basking in rare moments of marital peace, Sharon was struck down by an excruciating pain behind the sofa. She didn't fall, she flew. As if Zeus had hurled a bolt of lightning straight through her body. This wasn't a movie scene. It was real. Sharon had suffered a subacoid hemorrhage, a rare and deadly type of stroke. She lay paralyzed in the hospital for 9 days before doctors discovered that blood had silently flooded her brain, back, face, and spine. She had just a 1% chance of survival. She recalled watching the patient across from her, a young woman, die right before her eyes. No scream, no warning. In that moment, Sharon understood that death doesn't arrive like a tragic symphony. It comes in total silence, cutting through the sounds of life. But Sharon survived, not by miracle but by instinct. I have to live for my son. Yet the hardest part had only just begun. After brain surgery, she lost the ability to walk, talk, write, hear, and remember. Her mind was wiped clean as if someone had hit delete all. She suffered seizures 24/7, endured hallucinations, disorientation, and pain so intense she couldn't sit for more than 20 minutes. She had no insurance, no rehab program, no one to pay for her to relearn how to pronounce syllables. I had to learn everything again like a child, Sharon said, not as a metaphor but as a brutal reality. She wrote her name like a first grader. She relearned how to hold a spoon, how to form full sentences, how to balance her body. While the world assumed she was off on some luxurious retreat in a villa somewhere, Sharon was learning how to dress herself. But the disaster didn't stop at her body and mind. It reached her finances and even her legal identity. As she began reviewing her assets, Sharon discovered that everything once under her name, homes, bank accounts, had been transferred. She had lost $18 million. Nothing belonged to Sharon Stone anymore. The woman who had once reigned over Hollywood could no longer even prove who she was. "No one from my former life stayed by my side," she said. "I disappeared in every sense of the word. As her." Memory stumbled back in fragments. Only one thing anchored her, the will to survive. But even that at the time was no triumphant declaration. It was just a heavy breath in the night. Once again she had to ask herself, if I'm no longer Sharon Stone, the sex symbol, the actress, the celebrity, then who am I? When Sharon Stone opened her eyes after her near-death ordeal, the first thing on her mind wasn't the movie contracts she had lost or the fading image of her as a sex symbol. It was the little boy waiting for her at home. Rand Joseph Bronstein, the child she and her husband had adopted in 2000, was the last thread tying Sharon to this life. But while she was learning to walk again, to speak again, and struggling to gather the scattered pieces of herself, her ex-husband Phil Bronstein filed for divorce, remarried his new partner, and sued for full custody of their son. Sharon, still struggling to walk with a fragile memory and nightly seizures, didn't have the strength to withstand the drawn-out courtroom battles, and when she couldn't show up, people didn't show sympathy. They judged. The court ruled her an unfit mother, not for abuse, not for neglect, but because she had acted in R-rated films. They dug up Basic Instinct, Sliver, scrutinized every scene of nudity, every sensual line, as if a film role could define a woman's ability to be a mother. Even more bitter was another accusation raised in court. Sharon had allegedly suggested injecting Botox into Rand's feet to eliminate odor. An entirely baseless claim, but sensational enough for headlines and damaging enough to feed the public's quiet prejudice. No one asked how much physical and emotional pain had this woman endured. No one cared that Sharon entering the courtroom hadn't fully recovered her memory. Hollywood stayed silent or snittied. Some tabloids labeled her an outdated sex symbol. Directors who once praised her now looked away. Magazines that once put her on their covers now mocked her. Sharon Stone, from Siren to soap opera tragedy, she lost Rand, and with him she lost the right to define herself. In the eyes of the public, Sharon had become a has-been, someone who was once famous, once seductive, once on top, and now simply past her prime. But what Sharon Stone lost wasn't just a child. It was the sense of personhood stolen and redefined by others' gaze. She wasn't allowed to hurt, wasn't allowed to be weak, wasn't allowed to fail. In the darkness after the stroke, what remained wasn't the spotlight but a mother trying to survive. In silence, in humiliation, and in a love that never faded for the child she once cradled in her arms. 7 years. That's how long it took Sharon Stone to become whole again. Not just to physically recover, but to rebuild memory, acting skills, language, finances, trust, and dignity. No one waited for her return. No one believed that a woman who had once been bedridden from a stroke, who had lost custody of her child, who had been mocked as a washed-up sex symbol, could ever step onto a film set again. But Sharon Stone did quietly, without fanfare, without grand declarations, with unwavering resolve. She returned in Mosaic HBO, playing an artist whose murder drives the mystery. Then came Ratchet Netflix, where she portrayed a powerful yet psychologically twisted mother. Then What About Love, Nobody 2, and most recently in Memoriam, where she once again stood at the edge of life and death, this time through a role, not in reality. Alongside her art, Sharon chose to go beyond cinema. She became a social activist without needing a title, only the empathy of someone who had stared death in the face. Sharon raised and advocated over $34 million for HIV/AIDS research, helping fund a breakthrough pediatric treatment. She appeared in anti-sexual harassment campaigns, championed the rights of the homeless, and spoke publicly at educational events. The same spaces where she was once dismissed as just the woman who did the sex scene. And when the spotlight was no longer her only refuge, Sharon turned to painting as a form of healing. Her artworks, emotional, abstract yet powerful, were exhibited in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Berlin, and most notably at the ARRA Picus Museum in Rome. With raw colors and unstructured forms, her paintings revealed not just an artist but a survivor, a rememberer, someone who was angry and someone who forgave. In her private life, she never remarried. But Sharon was not alone. She raised three sons, Ran, Lear, and Quinn, crafting a family with her own two hands. And most remarkably, Ran, the son once taken from her by court order, later changed his surname to Stone and chose to live with his mother. A resurrection not only for Sharon, but for a sacred bond torn apart by law and prejudice. The world laughed at Sharon when she lost everything, but no one saw her weeping with her son after each seizure relapse. No one heard her whisper goodbye over the photo of her beloved dog, Joe Biggie Stone, a loyal friend whose death hit like losing a blood relative. No one except Sharon Stone truly knows how many fractures she had to walk through to keep going. And perhaps no one else could have lived the rest of their life as beautifully with three sons, paintings that bleed emotion, roles layered with meaning, and a heart that knows she was once a punchline. But now she is a symbol of rebirth. At 67, Sharon Stone no longer races after beauty standards or Hollywood fame. She lives to the rhythm of her own heart, no longer needing the spotlight nor the judgment of anyone. Sharon Stone is not just a movie star. She is a symbol of resurrection, of a pride forged through brushes with death, betrayal, public humiliation, and the near total loss of everything people usually call a life. She was once the sexiest woman on the planet, then dismissed as a dated joke. Once paralyzed in a hospital bed, listening as the woman beside her took her last breath, only to rise and relearn every syllable like a child. Once stripped of her child, her family, her fortune, and even her sense of self. And yet Sharon survived. Not as a ghost of what once was, but as living proof of the power of forgiveness, of forgiving others and herself. At an age when many retreat into quiet retirement, Sharon paints, acts, fights, raises her children, and embraces life. She doesn't need to be adored in the traditional sense, nor exalted like a goddess. She only asks to be respected as a human being who fought to the very end to keep her dignity intact. And if you've only ever known Sharon Stone by that one famous leg cross, maybe it's time to look again. Because that was just the opening move in a journey where beauty lies not on the screen but in this simple truth. That woman, once a victim, is now a survivor. And no one, not even fate, gets to decide for her anymore. If you've ever been knocked down by life, ever had to crawl back from loss, ever been laughed at for being vulnerable,